a lot of the tips that I'm going to share, they're not going to feel good to your flesh, but I guarantee you, if you apply them in your marriage, it will change your marriage. One of the main things that motivated me to want to talk more about this topic, I want to see more Christian women succeed in being a good wife. I'm not perfect and I don't know everything, but God has gave me some insight. And I want to share the wisdom that he taught me with you. In the Bible, it talks about how that the mature women is supposed to teach the younger women. I want to give back and share some of the things that I have learned. And hopefully you won't fall into some of the traps or mistakes that I have made by just watching this video. I stopped trying to lead my husband. Now, that was a hard one for me. I didn't stop trying to lead my husband overnight. It's something that it took months of practicing. God has a certain way that he designed for us to live. And one of the ways is to allow your husband to be the head of your household. I know that most women, and even myself, have a problem with allowing our husband to lead, but that's God's will. And if you want to live your life according to God's will, you're going to have to step back and allow your husband to lead. And I understand you have a fear that he's going to make mistakes. And yes, he's going to make some mistakes because even we make mistakes. And it doesn't mean that you don't have any opinion about how the way that you would like things to be done. And it doesn't mean that you guys are not a team, because you are a team. But even though you are a team, you still have to allow your husband to always have the final say so in your household. So I want to encourage you to try to support your husband instead of trying to control all of the decisions in your household. I stopped resisting submission. That's one thing that I am continually working on now, but I can honestly say when I stopped resisting submitting to my husband, it transformed me. It brought me closer to God and it restored my marriage. And I understand why a lot of women don't want to submit to their husband. For one thing, it doesn't feel good to your flesh. It's not popular in our society. It teaches us that submission represents weakness. But from what I have experienced, when you learn how to submit to your husband, it represents courage, faith in God, and wanting to please God. Before I started submitting to my husband, my marriage was in turmoil. My husband and I, we were fighting against each other. But when I learned how to submit to my husband, it even changed my husband's attitude towards me. He became more kinder, more concerned about meeting my needs, and even trying to please me. And one thing that I want you to understand is it is God's will for you to try to please your husband. In the Bible, it even talks about how that a single woman's desire is to please God. A married woman's desire is more of the world. She's trying to please her husband. So if you want to have a strong marriage, or if you are having problems in your marriage, one of the main things that you need to do is start trying to submit to your husband. I was having some serious issues in my marriage, and I wasn't the one at fault. So I really didn't want to do it, but God spoke to me and told me to start submitting to my husband. And I didn't want to listen to God because I felt like he wasn't being fair. How can you tell me to submit to my husband? And he's the one that you should be correcting. But God kept speaking to me about it. So eventually I listened. And when I listened, things turned around in my marriage. And it started out to where I was trying to please my husband. And God turned things around to where now he tries to please me. So there's power when you submit to your husband. And there's power when you live your life according to God's will. The enemy don't want us to submit to our husbands because he knows that it will change our marriages. It'll make us have a stronger bond just by submitting to our husbands. So I want to encourage you, take the step of faith and start trying to submit to your husband. Try to seek to please him. One more thing I do want to say about submission is about trust and mutual respect. Submission doesn't mean that you don't have an opinion or you can't disagree with your husband. It's more about just showing him respect and doing things in decent and in order. I stopped disrespecting my husband. Now, I've never been the type person that like to argue or say things to my husband in the public that I shouldn't have said. I've always have had self-control, and I know it's only because God has given me grace in that area. But my problem was more of whenever my husband would call my name and I'm practicing on my keyboard or I am trying to create some content for a video, and it's so easy for me to get distracted, so I have to have it really quiet. But what I notice is with my husband is like he don't need me or he don't call my name or need me to do anything until I'm busy. So I had a bad habit of whenever he would call me, whether he's at home or he's off and he just called me on the cell phone, I would like roll my eyes or be like or even when I'm talking to him, I'll try to hurry up and rush the conversation before I can get back to doing what I was doing. God started dealing with me about that. And he told me when I'm at work and when I am communicating with my coworkers or with my boss, when they ask me to do something, and if I'm busy, I'm not short patient with them, I stop what I'm doing and I try to help. He told me that I should do the same thing with my husband. You should be careful about the way you communicate with your spouse and the tone of voice that you use with your husband. You should seek to have a meek and a quiet spirit. A meek and a quiet spirit is something that you don't see often these days. If you don't have a meek, quiet, and a calm spirit, you want to ask God to help you. You need to have those characteristics because it is helpful in a marriage. In the Bible, it talks about instead of being so concerned about our outward appearance, our hair, wearing fine jewelry, we should be more concerned about our heart, trying to have a meek and a gentle, quiet spirit that's precious in the sight of God and is also beneficial in your marriage. Proverbs talk about the nagging wife when you like to complain a lot or fuss. Instead of bringing you and your husband closer together, it's going to tear you further apart. So be careful about the tone and the words that you use when you are communicating with your spouse. Proverbs 31:26 says, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Use your words wisely and make sure whatever it is you're saying is something that's edifying. Be careful about the tone of voice that you use with your husband. Love and kindness can get you more of what you want, more than being aggressive or fussy. I stopped neglecting to pray for him. Lately, God has been dealing with me about the importance of praying for my husband. My husband is a pastor, and off and on over the years, the devil has tried to attack him in many ways. He has tried to attack him in his body, his mind, set traps for him just by being around him, and also being a pastor's child. I know that they have a stressful job. I constantly, every morning, say a prayer for my husband. I pray that God will strengthen his body, to renew his strength, to strengthen his mind. And I also pray and ask God to help him to make good decisions, especially being that since he's a pastor, he has to lead by being an example to others, and he have to instruct the flock. And also he's the leader of my household. So I want him to be able to make good, sound decisions. It's good to pray positive prayers over your husband's life instead of asking God to correct your husband or to get him about something, pray that God will strengthen him to help him to achieve the goals that he designed for him. I stopped comparing my husband to others. It's easy to get in the habit of finding fault in your mate. And what's bad about doing that is you won't recognize your mate's good qualities. You focus on their weakness instead of their strengths. And one thing that I purposely do is focus on my husband's strengths. I even compliment him about things that I like about him. For example, my husband is not into going on vacations or going to events. I have learned that if I want to do things like that, I'm going to have to do that without him. But on the other hand, my husband is great at being a provider. He pays all the bills. I work, but I'm able to do whatever I want to with the money that I make. And I'm so thankful to him for that. And I tell him often too, because I want him to know that I recognize and that I appreciate what he does. Another thing that my husband is really good at is he enjoys buying me gifts. And what I love about that is he doesn't wait till it's Valentine's Day, my birthday, or Christmas to buy me a gift. He buy me things just because. And I try not to take that for granted. Whenever he buy me something, I'll make sure that I express my appreciation because he didn't have to. So start focusing on your spouse's strength. Don't focus on your spouse's weaknesses. Don't be afraid to express positive things to your husband so that he will know that you recognize it and that you appreciate it. Now, I have to add this. There are two more things that I love about my husband. One of them is he knows how to cook. And I don't have to cook, but I choose to do it on the weekends. And it's only because I don't want him to have to cook all of the time. And I figured that that's the least thing that I can do. My husband enjoys cleaning, and that's very important to me. I don't want to come home from work and the house is in a mess. He don't have to do it, but he chooses to do it. And I am thankful for it. And I also try to be mindful and not to take advantage of his good deeds. Just because he enjoys cooking and cleaning, it doesn't mean that he should have to do it all the time. Because when you love someone, you don't want to take advantage of them. I stopped expecting my husband to be able to read my mind. Now, that's one issue that I've learned, I would say, within the last year. And it has always been hard for me to communicate my feelings, not just to my husband, but to anybody. But I'm learning how to express myself, to tell him what I like and what I don't like, or what I would like for him to change or start doing. Because he's not going to know if I don't tell him. There have been times in my life if I'm feeling sad and I expect him to be able to pick up on it and to comfort me. And he didn't do it because he didn't know. It's okay for you to communicate with your husband. Let him know about your needs and what you desire from him. But of course, when you communicate with your husband, you want to make sure that you're doing it in the right way, having the right tone in your voice, and communicate with kindness. That makes a huge difference. I stopped holding grudges against my husband. When you're married, you are going to go through different things in your marriage because no one is perfect. But you're going to have to practice learning how to forgive and not to hold grudges. And when you know that you haven't forgiven your spouse is whenever you get into a argument and you bring up something that he done in the past, that's a red flag that you haven't forgiven your spouse. And I know that some things it is hard to forgive, but you're going to have to practice doing it. And one of the main ways that you can learn how to forgive, that is through prayer. Pray constantly about it and ask God to help you to forgive your husband. And the Bible talks about how that when we don't forgive others, how that God won't forgive us. And I want you to focus just on that. It's not like you are okay with the offense, but it's more about doing what's right. And God requires us to forgive. Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight, but keep praying about it. And eventually you won't think about it anymore. Or if you think about it, you won't dwell on it. God will take away the hurt, the disappointment, resentment out of your heart. I stopped thinking that my way is always right. And you guys, you know how it's easy to feel that you're always right, but no one is always right. Or even just always wanting things a certain way. My husband, he's great at decorating. And in the past,
I allowed him to decorate the whole house because he's good at it. But within the last, I would say 10 years or more, I have got involved with wanting to decorate my home as well. So, and that's something that we do together. But every so often, when I come home, my husband likes to change things around. He want to move things around or replace furniture. And normally he's great at it. But every now and then, I do want to have my input about it because it's my home. And I know that sometimes we as women, we can be territorial of our home. And I think that is because God put that in us. We're good at managing our home. But I have to learn to allow him to make some decisions about the decorating and don't take it personal if he changed things without talking to you first. I'm learning to let the small things go and just appreciate that he wants to help and make our home look and feel more cozy. So I'm learning to just let him make some decisions about our home.
Stop speaking negatively about my husband. Now, I can honestly say that I have never been guilty of that, but I want to share that with you because I have talked to many women that constantly speak negatively about their husband. And this is something that I think it would be different if I was the only person that they said negative things about their husband too, but this is just something that they did with everybody. And you shouldn't speak negatively about your husband because, for one thing, it's not going to help. And another thing is going to make him look bad. And one thing that you have to realize as well, you guys are one. So when you make your husband look bad, you're making yourself look bad too. Instead of speaking negatively about your husband, pray for him instead. One thing you don't want is for it to get back to him that you are talking about him, because that's not going to help your marriage. If anything, it will make it worse. So watch the way you speak about your husband when he's not around. And just remember the golden rule to treat others the way that you want to be treated. I'm sure you don't want your husband saying negative things about you to his friends. Tip number 10, I stopped neglecting my own growth. It's very important in a relationship that you examine yourself. We all have something about ourselves that we need to improve or change. And instead of focusing on your husband's faults, focus on your own. Ask God to show you yourself. I can remember when my husband and I was having some serious problems in our marriage, and I thought that we were going to get a divorce. Even though I felt that my husband was at fault, God spoke to me and told me to start working on myself. Eventually, I listened to God. And when I start working on myself and stop focusing on my husband, that's when my marriage began to change. It's something about when you evaluate yourself and try to make sure that you are doing what's pleasing to God. And by you changing your behavior, it can cause your husband to change his behavior. There is something about when you work on yourself, things around you changes. Once I start working on myself, I was more conscious about the way that I interact with my husband. In the Bible, it talks about how that you reap what you sow. If you sow good seeds, eventually you will start reaping them. Don't focus so much on your husband's behavior, focus on yourself. One thing that I stopped doing was expecting my husband to fulfill me. For some reason, I don't know why, but a lot of women, when they become married, they feel that their husband is going to make them happy. But no one can make you happy. You have to create your own happiness, and it comes from within. So don't expect your husband to make you happy. Only God can complete you. And the reason why is because He is our creator. He knows us more than we know ourselves. The more you start drawing closer to God and walking in His will, it will bring you happiness. Thank you for tuning in. And I hope that at least one of the tips that I shared with you resonate with you. I also would like to know what tip that you are going to apply to your life. If you want to support me and you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, and share with a friend. Make sure you stay tuned in to my next video about balancing love and ministry. May God bless you. Bye.